Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I'll bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowner's or renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico Easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Hi there, and good evening, and welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, you'll find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks. 20 years since 9/11. That's hard to believe if you are old enough to recall where you were and what you were doing. And if you're 25 or older, that probably includes you. But here we are, approaching that date, and we will do so in this first portion of the program tonight with Toby Harnden. He is an award-winning author, former foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times of London and the Daily Telegraph, and he's written the book, The First Casualty from Little Brown, subtitled The Untold Story of the CIA Mission to Avenge 9/11. Toby, good evening.
Hi, Jim. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Glad to do so. I must confess that this is not a story of which I was aware, and I thought I was reasonably well plugged into the news. Was this not well publicized?
Not really. I mean, obviously, CIA operations tend to be secret. The 8 men of Team Alpha included Mike Spann, Johnny Michael Spann from Alabama, who was killed in action on November 25th, 2001, and he was the first casualty of the title. So the fact that he was killed was publicized, and his affiliation with the agency was. But the details of the rest of the team, not so much. And in particular, the experience of David Tyson, who was a CIA officer who was with him on the day that Mike Spann was killed, that was not known about.
Mm-hmm. Give us a bit of the background here. Was there the feeling that we needed to do something quickly? Obviously, once we were able to ascertain that Al-Qaeda was behind this, and Al-Qaeda had become virtually a partner with the Taliban in running Afghanistan. I understand when they finally got to Kabul, the finances were hard to extricate one from the other. That, of course, was the long-range goal, to get the Taliban out of power. Was this something that was supposed to be done? In a way, it almost makes me think of the Jimmy Doolittle raid during World War II, in which Army medium bombers bombed Tokyo. Not that we did a lot of damage, but it just let the Japanese in general, in particular, and the world in general know that we were in the fight. Was that the point of this particular mission, to let Al-Qaeda know we were in the fight?
Well, I think that was part of it, and I remember it vividly. You know, I was a reporter for the Telegraph in downtown Washington, D.C. on 9/11, and I remember going home that night and seeing Humvees on the street corners, and there was a sort of sense of, obviously we'd had 3,000 people killed that day, and there was a sense of there's going to be another attack, and I think there was certainly a desire for revenge amongst the American people and the Bush administration, but I think it was also a policy thing where we knew almost immediately that it was Al-Qaeda. We knew that they'd been given sanctuary by the Taliban in Afghanistan, and that was an ungoverned space. And there was a sort of a bipartisan desire, very strongly supported by public opinion, that we needed to find out the people who did this and get Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, but sort of more importantly, almost, to stop future attacks and to expel Al-Qaeda from this sort of ungoverned space, so that they couldn't plan future attacks in the sort of weeks and months ahead.
Yeah. I recall that day vividly as well. I was also in Washington, and my usual trip home of a little less than an hour took me 6 hours that day, as the entire city was moving out. And I remember as I came in that night, I got about a 2-hour nap and turned around to come back in to do this job. And part of my way in involved coming in on Massachusetts Avenue. and I drove by a little side street that most people didn't know about. I happened to know that was where, at the time, Bill and Hillary Clinton were living in retirement. The street was blocked by a D.C. National Guard Humvee. So, yes, I remember that pretty well myself there. In terms of putting this mission together, these 8 CIA officers were dropped into the mountains of northern Afghanistan on October 17th of 2001, Team Alpha, and that, of course, is just a month and 16 days after the fact. I don't know how long it takes to put together a mission like this, but my guess is that was pushing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another CIA team called Jawbreaker that went in on September 26th, but the difference with them was that they went into the Panjshir Valley, which was the only part of Afghanistan that was controlled by the Northern Alliance. Ahmad Shah Massoud had just been assassinated 2 days earlier. The Team Alpha were the first ones to go sort of behind enemy lines into Taliban-controlled territory. And yeah, I mean, it was very improvised, and it was put together in a hurry because there was this kind of sense of an imperative to sort of to get in there and dislodge Al-Qaeda. And the 8 guys on the team, they weren't all paramilitaries. 4 of them were, but I think people might imagine that they would all be sort of elite, sort of special forces, like tier 1 operators, perhaps like the SEALs that went in and got bin Laden in 2011. But in fact, most of them weren't. I mean, 2 of them were case officers, including David Tyson. There were linguists and sort of tribal experts and regional experts. One was a medic, one was a Green Beret, and some of them knew each other, but some of them had barely met each other before they went on this mission. And they really did go into the unknown. They had to improvise. They had to link up with Abdul Rashid Dostum, who's sort of notorious ethnic Uzbek warlord. And there was an incredible amount of risk every single day because this was sort of just unknown terrain to them.
Yeah. You describe, in fact, in your book, First Casualty, them as an eclectic band. A lot of people, I guess, don't realize it, but special forces themselves tend to be an eclectic band, and they do a lot of things. I mean, a lot of people would tell you that right off the bat, the Green Berets are first and foremost killers. Well, they can certainly fight and kill. They are, as I understand it, first and foremost trainers. That is to say, they are to teach guerrilla forces on our side of whatever the conflict may be, various things that will be helpful to them in their activities. And I don't know that maybe America should be more aware of the fact that that special forces, as they are currently constituted, do a lot more than floss with barbed wire.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, one of the fascinating things about this story was I interviewed all 6 of the still living members of Team Alpha. And a lot of Green Berets, ODA 595, the famous horse soldiers from Doug Stanton's book. I believe Doug's been on the show a number of times.
Yeah.
It became 12th movie. So I got to know a lot of these people, and really varied, fascinating people with different takes on life, different backgrounds. And within Team Alpha, they gelled really well because they had sort of complementary skills, and they knew. One was a communicator, one was a medic, one spoke Uzbek, one spoke Dari, and they knew what they could do. And also the division of labor between the Green Berets, who joined Team Alpha 3 days after Alpha got in, ODA 595 came in. The Green Berets concentrated on the Taliban and calling in airstrikes and sort of winning the tactical battle, if you like, while the CIA concentrated on the tribal relationships, kind of manipulating and managing the rivalries, and also looking at Al-Qaeda and getting strategic intelligence on Al-Qaeda. So it's fascinating because there's a lot of hand-wringing at the moment, and obviously we're in a very difficult situation with Afghanistan, and we've had a 20-year war that's ended in defeat. But this was a period of early and I guess conditional. I mean, it wasn't final success, but a large degree of success when, with a light footprint and these sort of elite special forces and regional and linguistic experts, were able to sort of fight alongside the Afghans, but let the Afghans do most of the fighting, and it worked pretty well.
More to come with our guest, Toby Harnden. He is an award-winning author, former foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times of London and the Daily Telegraph, and he has written the book, The First Casualty. First Casualty is subtitled The Untold Story of the CIA Mission to Avenge 9/11. And it's published by Little Brown. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. And we'll be back on the Bohannon Show in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, as we begin some remembering of 9/11 with a story that many of us couldn't even forget. We were not really aware of what happened in this story in the book, First Casualty, the untold story of the CIA mission to avenge 9/11. It is told by a person used to telling such stories, a former foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times of London and the Daily Telegraph. He's an award-winning author, Toby Harnden, with us tonight. And so the Team Alpha is there, and they are being pretty successful. But then you write, the Taliban hatches a plot with Al-Qaeda to hit back. They fake a surrender.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one of the sort of chilling things about this period was, although it was successful and the Taliban regime was toppled, a lot of the sort of complexities and the kind of messy nature of Afghanistan really came through. So the seeds really of some of the problems that were to come in subsequent years. So yeah, Mazar-e-Sharif, the northern city had fallen. It was the first big city to be taken from the Taliban, and it looked like the Taliban were staging a sort of a last stand in the north in Kunduz. And you had Al-Qaeda units that were working with the Taliban. One of the members of those Al-Qaeda units was John Walker Lind, a Californian, and there was a surrender brokered between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance and Abdul Rashid Dostum. And it turned out that it was sort of an Afghan tradition to not search people properly, and there was a sort of element of honor in the surrender. But these Al-Qaeda prisoners were not Afghans. They were mostly Arabs. And it emerged later on that many of the prisoners had secreted grenades and guns, in their robes. And Mullah Fazl, who was a notorious Taliban commander, who is likely to be a figure in the new Taliban government, it seems that he was the mastermind behind this plot, that these prisoners would surrender in Mazar-e-Sharif, while most of the U.S. forces and the CIA and the Northern Alliance were in Kunduz, and that they would stage an uprising in the fort, and there were other Taliban units who were moving towards Mazar-e-Sharif, and potentially, if this uprising had succeeded and it came pretty close, then the Taliban would have recaptured Mazar-e-Sharif, and the whole story of this war would have been different. So it was kind of fascinating to be able to put that together. I mean, at the time, it sort of seemed like it was a sort of a random, spontaneous revolt by prisoners, but I was able to establish by, talking to everybody and researching this in great depth that this was a plan to take back Mazar-e-Sharif.
The idea that you talk to everybody, you're talking to people who do not, as a rule of thumb, tend to talk shop. They are not people who tend to run off at the mouth a great deal. I'm wondering how you got all of these people to do just that, and the extent to which the CIA itself was involved, either helping or hindering your efforts.
That's a good question. Yeah, well, it wasn't easy. I had no, particular in with anybody, or certainly not the CIA. But I've been fascinated by this story for many, many years, since I saw footage of David Tyson running through the fort after Mike Spann, his comrade, had been killed, sort of clutching a pistol. And I eventually tracked David Tyson down. I think it was in 2013. He'd been cited in acknowledgements by an academic in Indiana University, and I contacted the academic, and he put me in touch with him. And it turned out that David was living in Vienna, Virginia, just a few miles from where I live now. And
It's
where
a suburb
I
of
lived then.
Washington, for those who don't know.
That's right. Yeah. A bit less glamorous than Vienna, Austria. And anyway, so I met David in a Panera Bread, and he was friendly, but he couldn't say very much because he was still serving in the agency. And we sort of kept in touch. I sent him Christmas cards, but he wasn't really, emerging to sort of tell his story. But then at the beginning of last year, he contacted me and said, "Hey, I've just retired. I'm ready to talk." And so I talked to him, and he's a fascinating guy. I mean, a regional expert, somebody who's sort of really lived a fascinating life, and whose life was sort of turned upside down by the events in 2001. But I then went to J.R. Seeger, who was the chief, Justin Sapp, who was the Green Beret, who's still serving, and they were sort of semi-public. And I went to see them, and I think I built up sort of trust and credibility. They could see that I didn't have an agenda, that I just wanted to find out what happened. And yeah, I was worried about the CIA. I was thinking that they might try to hinder me. They might block me. So I didn't approach them until I was sure that I had enough to write a book. And at that point, I'd spoken to George Tenet, the CIA director at the time, Kofa Black, Hank Crumpton, sort of senior CIA officers. And again, I think they realized that, I was serious. And so I contacted the agency and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." And they helped me. I mean, it didn't open the vaults. I didn't get secret documents from them or anything like that.
I dare
but they
say.
did facilitate some interviews. And I was surprised and very grateful because, some of these people, they're still contractors. They've sort of taken, a sort of a vow almost of secrecy, and they wouldn't have spoken if the agency hadn't have given them the green light. So that enabled me to sort of complete the research and talk to really everybody, I think, who was involved in this.
Yeah. Full disclosure for those who don't know, and I'm sure many in the audience do, but I had a top secret plus security clearance in Vietnam, so I've been on both sides of this particular issue, and I'm aware of not only the hyper tendency, let's say, to keep things secure, which in many cases is very justified, but also another tendency, and that is to use a classified stamp to cover your butt. And that happens on more than one occasion. I've seen things that were stamped secret that were hardly more than mess hall menus. I'm sure you've run across similar such circumstances, Toby.
Yeah, so I was in the Navy for 10 years, Royal Navy. You can tell from the accent, British born, now an American citizen since 2009. But yeah, so I had a top secret clearance actually. But I remember, the real culture of secrecy in Britain, and I had actually a big fight over a previous book with the Ministry of Defense.
Well, you wound up in a big lawsuit. You've been imprisoned in Zimbabwe. We don't have time in the rest of this half hour, but I want to get to some of your background, because your background, I would think that it would make you, given what you've been through, it would make you a little antsy about writing a book like this. Not that I don't think that the journalists tend to get thrown in jail in this country for writing something like First Casualty, but you had to think about that in the back of your mind, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, but I guess, I look at myself and I think I've always, it's sort of my personality a little bit to push the envelope with things.
Sure.
And if somebody says no, then I'm more likely to try to do it. Or if somebody says that's impossible, I'll think, well, maybe I could pull it off. So I like a challenge, and I like to, the journalist in me certainly likes to get information that I'm not supposed to have. There's nothing like the kind of excitement you get when you get sort of a classified document or something handed to you, and that happened in the process of this. Now, of course, I do not want to damage national security. No. And I certainly, there is things in books that I could have put in about, tactics, techniques, and procedures.
But you did not. The clock is elapsing for this half hour, and we'll be back with more in just a moment. Jim Bohannon Show. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626, as we talk with former foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times of London and the Daily Telegraph, and an award-winning author as well, Toby Harnden, who has written First Casualty, published by Little Brown, and subtitled The Untold Story of the CIA Mission to Avenge 9/11. Toby was explaining something that I think is often misunderstood about journalists as the half hour intervened, and since the computer was about to cut us off, I did so early, but I wanted him to have a full chance to explain. Yes, journalists are by nature nosy. However, that does not mean that we are out to destroy national security so we can get a good story. Please continue what you were saying, Toby.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important for a journalist to, I'm an American as well as a journalist. We can see what happened on 9/11 and in other terrorist attacks. And so I don't want to do anything that's going to, help America's enemies or make it more difficult for the United States to, protect its citizens. Now, of course, part of the skill or, the trick of being a journalist is to recognize, as you say, when somebody's just sort of covering their behind, or when it's something genuine. But in this case, 20 years we were, and we now are, out of Afghanistan. It was pretty much all history, and that was very much part of my pitch when I was talking to people to say, hey, I think it's time to talk, because I think Americans and the rest of the world, could learn a lot from this story.
You, at one point, talk about how the United States found a winning strategy only to abandon it, since many of us are searching for answers right now. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, now listen, I mean, it's very easy 20 years later, sort of sitting in an armchair in, Virginia, to sort of say, oh, I had the answer. And so everything was difficult. And, I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. First went there in 2006. I was there at the height of the fighting in Helmand in the south in 2009. And there were no easy answers. But I do believe that if we look at this early period that's covered in First Casualty, we had a small number of Americans on the ground, some British as well. British Special Forces were there. There were CIA intelligence and regional specialists and linguists, elite special forces, and CIA paramilitaries, and of course the awesome might of US air power. And that's sort of what made the difference. But it was an Afghan fight. The US, I don't believe there was a US invasion in 2001. I think the invasion happened in 2002. These were essentially advisors going in small numbers to help the indigenous Afghan resistance, the Northern Alliance. So Afghans fighting against the Taliban, who were hosting foreigners, Al-Qaeda, mainly Arabs. So it was, we all know that the Afghan, resist the invader, but we weren't the invaders in those early weeks. Now, unfortunately, I think success led to a sort of a degree of hubris, and it led the Bush administration at the time to sort of believe that this was easy and let's move on to Iraq and change a regime there. I think what also happened was that rather than a light footprint of advising and letting the Afghans do the fighting and work things out in their sort of, messy way, which is not, the perfect sort of Western way of doing things, we essentially had an invasion of conventional troops pouring in 2002. We stopped Hamid Karzai from doing a deal with the negotiations with the remnants of the Taliban, which might have given them a small role in government. And we sort of moved to centralized nation building, and what we've seen unfold over the last 20 years. So I think if we stuck to something close to those principles from the beginning, rather than going for this massive nation building sort of exercise, then things could have been very different.
I think that it's important for us to realize that in order for something that resembles a free society, it requires that you have a certain preconditions. A sense of nationhood would be one thing, and some practice of self-governance. One thing that has always bothered me about American history is that we were taught basically that the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, and then came the Boston Tea Party. Well, there was 150 years in there that we know little about, except, of course, for the Salem witch trials. Not one of our happier episodes, but the point is we had 150 years separated by an ocean back when that meant something, and largely the people back in London let us alone as long as various products, tobacco and furs and what have you, were headed their way. We had 150 years to get this right, and a society that has never had any experience at that may not do it so well. Plus, something else, we tend to think of freedom as being something which everybody yearns for. In point of fact, there are any number of societies out there where people have never been prepared for freedom, and they actually find freedom and the choices that are available somewhat intimidating. For example, there are some Russians who came here after the fall of the Iron Curtain, and they would go to a store and they would find 30 different mouthwashes and 30 different toothpastes, and they were used to going to stores in Moscow where, if they were lucky and the shelves were stocked, there was the mouthwash, the toothpaste, and something as simple as consumer choices. Freedom is not necessarily universally worshipped and adored, and I think that it's important for us to remember things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a sort of natural American kind of optimism, I guess it would be one way of putting it.
Hubris would be another way, yes.
Well, yeah. We assume that people always want to be like us. And, sometimes they do. I mean, a lot of people, I'm an immigrant. A lot of people, America is a sort of a beacon in the world. But, Afghan society is very, very different. It's tribal. I mean, we talk about warlords as if that's a sort of a pejorative, but Afghanistan was a country that was constantly at war. And so your tribal and ethnic leaders were represented their people, but they were also victors in battle. And we decided that we would marginalize the warlords. So Abdul Rashid Dostum, who fought very bravely, for his own interests as well as America's, but he was our ally, and he was the warlord that fought with us in 2001. He essentially became persona non grata after 2001 because his human rights record, surprise, surprise, was not perfect. And so rather than accept that it's a different way of doing things, it's a different country, everybody's not going to adhere to our values, we sort of tried to create a centralized government that was just like us, and it didn't work.
Yeah. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 as we look back on the impending 20th anniversary of 9/11 with Toby Harnden, an award-winning author, his latest book, First Casualty, from Little Brown, and a former foreign correspondent for the Sunday Times of London and the Daily Telegraph. Here's a call from Bill in Janesville, Wisconsin. Hello, Bill.
Yeah, hello, Jimbo. I got a question for him. What happened to this bounty they have on the Taliban, the head of it, and why is the CIA still wanting to meet with him, and why would Biden want to meet with him when we have that last I heard, it was between $1 to $5 million bounty on that guy.
The CIA director did meet with roughly his counterpart, I guess, in the new Taliban government. I wasn't aware that President Biden had a desire to meet with these people, but I do recall tales of a bounty many years ago. Toby, do you recall that, and is it still in effect?
Yeah, that's Mullah Baradar. He was arrested by the CIA in a joint operation in Pakistan. I think in 2010. He was released by the Trump administration in 2018 by the Pakistanis, or the Trump administration pushed the Pakistanis to do it because they thought he was going to be a sort of a peace negotiator in Doha, and now he's the head of the government. I talked about Mullah Fazl before, who was guilty of genocide, according to the UN, in northern Afghanistan before 2001. He was in Guantanamo Bay for 12 years. He was released by the Obama administration in 2014. One of the Taliban five swapped for Bo Bergdahl. So, yeah, it's a messy business full of contradictions, and I can tell you that a lot of the people, the CIA officers who fought at the beginning of this war against the Taliban, are extremely distressed and angry about what is going on. Their principal desire right now, and what they're working on, sort of pretty much every spare hour, is to get Afghan allies out of it. But yeah, I mean, they are not happy. They don't believe that the Taliban has changed. They don't believe that somehow, they're going to be some sort of ally against ISIS-K, and it's pretty upsetting for these guys.
I want to come back and talk about that very thing in just a moment. A memo, by the way, to Bill in Janesville 3 weeks from this past morning. On the morning of Monday the 27th, at 10:30 your time, Bill, I'll be talking with Tim Brimmel on your talk show over WCLO, so you might want to tune in at that time. 1-866-50-JIMBO, and we'll be back with Toby Harnden, the author of First Casualty, in just a moment. Back to the Jimbo Hannon Show with Toby Harnden, the author of First Casualty from Little Brown and Company. And you had mentioned before the break the notion of the Taliban possibly having had a role in the government back in the preceding 20 years. And have they changed any? I would say yes, they have changed. They've become much more adept at using the appropriate rhetoric necessary to fool gullible and naive Westerners. For my money, they're a pack of savages. And this notion of cultural differences, I must say that, I mean, you could make the same argument by a Nazi. Yes, of course, we're a little anti-Semitic, but after all, anti-Semitism is a fine old European tradition. We're just carrying it a step further. For my money, I don't see any way that they would ever compromise with anybody. To compromise with the Taliban is another way of saying we will let you in so that you may find a way to undo any such coalition activity. Now, yours is a more experienced and perhaps a nuanced perspective. Am I giving them an unfair knock here?
No, I would pretty much go along with that, Jim. I mean, these were people who shot women in the head with Kalashnikovs in packed soccer stadiums because they were accused of adultery. They chopped the hands of thieves off. They stoned gay men to death. Women couldn't work. Girls couldn't go to school. All females had to be clothed, covered from head to foot. So yeah, it was medieval savagery, and it was a sort of 7th century notion of Islam. And yes, they use WhatsApp and social media and iPhones, but really, I think that's just those are just the tools that they're sort of turning against us. And the other point on this, I think, the one make is that the idea that now in victory, this should be the moment in which they try and embrace some of our values and be more like us. That doesn't make any sense.
Not in the least. Archie calls in from Emerson, Indiana. Hello, Archie.
Howdy, Jimbo, and how's it, Mr. Toby?
Harnden. Toby Harnden. Yes, go ahead.
Harnden.
Hi, Archie.
I hope someday you'll do a story of Station K and the CIA Station K at Coast.
Well, for the rest of us who don't know exactly what you're talking about, Archie, what exactly is Station K at Coast?
Well, it was one of the CIA outposts, and there was a...
well, where is Coast?
That killed a number of CIA personnel.
I just was wondering, where was this Station K? The rest of us, I'm sure that you and Toby could have a great conversation, but the rest of us are not quite sure where this was.
Coast Afghanistan.
Oh, the coast of... well, Afghanistan doesn't have a coast, but...
no, Khost.
Oh, it's a town. That's what I was sort of asking. Okay, go ahead, Toby.
I haven't heard of Station K, but I've made a note, and I will have a look at it. There's a very good book called Triple Agent by Joby Warwick, which was about it was a Jordanian, the Jordanians believed that they had a Jordanian doctor who was treating Al-Qaeda prisoners Al Qaeda members, senior Al Qaeda members, and he was taken to the CIA base at Coast. I think it was the end of 2014, if I'm not mistaken. It turned out that it was a triple agent. It was an Al Qaeda agent who had rigged himself up as a suicide bomber, wasn't searched properly, and blew himself up and killed a number of CIA officers and contractors, including the base chief, Jennifer Matthews. So, the biggest loss of life of the agency sort of in modern times. And, clearly some very serious sort of mistakes were made there. But I'll look into Station K and find out what that is.
There you go, Archie. Thank you for your thoughts and your service. Back with more in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show with Toby Harnden, a veteran foreign correspondent. He's been through a few things. He was imprisoned in Zimbabwe, prosecuted in Britain for protecting confidential sources, and vindicated by a $23 million public inquiry in Ireland. Tell us a war story or two.
Yeah, I guess I've been in a few scrapes. Zimbabwe. It was in 2005. It was the Mugabe regime. They banned foreign journalists. They particularly hated their former colonial masters in Britain. So a photographer and I, we sneaked in as tourists. We went to see elephants and hippos and took all the photos and stuff. But we got caught and we were arrested. We tried to make a run for it. That didn't work. We were arrested. We were put in police cells, and then we ended up in a jail, in a cell of more than 100 people. We were the only Europeans in the jail. We were worried about disease. We were worried we might get a 4-year sentence. The charge was practicing journalism without accreditation, but they couldn't read my notes. My shorthand was indecipherable. We had all the elephants and hippo photos. So in the end, we were actually found not guilty of practicing journalism, deported and banned from the country.
Wow. All right. Amazing story there. Let us talk with Michael in Virginia Beach, Virginia now. Hello, Michael.
Hello, and happy Labor Day to both of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Herndon, you described the Hitler of Afghanistan as having had a bounty, multi-million-dollar bounty placed on his head, having been caught and imprisoned and then let out by Donald Trump. You went past that way too fast. You'll have to come back on this show so we can talk about the...
Why don't we just let him answer now in the minute and a half that is left about what Michael is saying?
Sure, yeah. So 2018, there were negotiations in Doha, Qatar, between the Trump administration and the Taliban, not the Afghan government. They were excluded. And there was a belief that Mullah Baradar, who was in Pakistani custody, was a more, quote, moderate leader of the Taliban, and that he was useful for the talk. So my understanding is that Mike Pompeo, and it was reported in the Wall Street Journal, prevailed on the Pakistanis to have Baradar released. And Baradar, it looks like, is going to be the head of the new Taliban government in Afghanistan.
Not a good move. About 30 seconds to go here. Any talk of making First Casualty into a movie?
Not yet, but I'm certainly open to offers from any Hollywood producers who are listening. I mean, you try and write a book like this with a sort of compelling narrative, with characters in a sort of movie type way. So, I guess I'm biased. I think it will make a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I think it would make a fantastic movie. I would absolutely agree. Toby Harnden, Harnden, by the way. The book is First Casualty, published by Little Brown and subtitled The Untold Story of the CIA Mission to Avenge 9/11. It is quite a tale and one that we needed to tell. It was not one with which I was familiar, and I thought I had a reasonable understanding of a lot of things regarding the background of 9/11, but now we're all somewhat better informed. Stay tuned. We've got more to come, and we'll be back with more. Jim Bohannon here, and of course, we come to you weeknights here at Westwood One.
Do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I'll bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowner's or renter's insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico Easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Hi there, and good evening, and welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, you'll find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks, as the departure from Afghanistan remains one stained with confusion and just plain inexplicable behavior. We are now told that an organizer for chartered flights to evacuate Americans and some of our Afghan allies from the Mazar-e-Sharif airport has accused the State Department of holding up the plane, saying blood will be on the White House hands if any of the people awaiting are injured or killed by the Taliban. Another organizer has told Reuters that about 1,000 people, including Americans, are being held in Afghanistan, awaiting the State Department to provide clearance for their flights. We had certainly heard that the Taliban were not cooperating. This is the first I had heard of a charge that the State Department itself was holding up the flights. But one individual involved in chartering private planes to ferry people out of Afghanistan has put the onus solely on the State Department for holding up the flights in question. That person says that this is zero place to be negotiating with American lives. Those are people standing on the tarmac. All it takes is a phone call. And the person went on to say, if one life is lost as a result of this, the blood is on the White House's hands. The blood is on their hands. This person, not identified by Fox News to avoid jeopardizing the rescue efforts, said, it is not the Taliban that is holding this up. As much as it sickens me to say that, it is the United States government. That the person suggested that the State Department is embarrassed that private charters are helping Americans escape Afghanistan after the Biden administration left them stranded following the U.S. military withdrawal last week. That is kind of strange reasoning. Surely the State Department would be happy that anybody aided in getting people out. But the flight organizer who talked to the Reuters news service also blamed the State Department for failing to inform the Taliban that it approved of the departures. Again, why that would be necessary, I would think that it would be quite clear to everyone involved that the United States government approves of any such departure. But in any event, the private group Plan B, which is trying to rescue people in Afghanistan, has told Fox News that they've been trying to get clearance to land in Doha, Qatar, and the military commanders of one air base in Doha have also told those seeking clearance that they must go through the State Department. So apparently, according to one person from this particular group, Plan B, Rick Clay, says he has a manifest of 4,500 names of American citizens, green card holders, and Afghans with special immigrant visas wanting to leave Afghanistan. 4,500 names. He said he's given the State Department 800 names of people who will be passengers on the first flights. So apparently, according to this person from Plan B, Rick Clay, they are having problems getting permission from the State Department for the flights leaving Afghanistan to land in a neighboring country. One would think that that would be up to the neighboring country. But according to this individual, the State Department is not allowing the private charters to land anywhere, and said that agency officials are blaming the absence of traffic controllers and radar issues for the delay. What is being put forward as a government rationale doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But for what it's worth, 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number. 1-866-505-4626, and we'll pause on the Jimbo Hannon Show and be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jimbo Hannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And to say that there are problems involved in this latest notion of using charter flights to get people out of Afghanistan is a vast understatement. Representative Michael McCall, the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Relations Committee, says the Taliban is holding Americans hostage, and that would certainly seem an appropriate term. And McCall says that 6 planes at the Mazar-i-Sharif airport have been cleared by the State Department, but the Taliban is refusing to allow them to leave. They are not clearing airplanes to depart. They've sat at the airport for the last couple of days, these planes, and they're not allowed to leave. And according to McCall, again, the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Relations Committee, we know the reason why is because the Taliban want something in exchange. This is turning into a hostage situation where they're not going to allow American citizens to leave until they get full recognition from the United States of America. If that is in fact what we're talking about, then this puts things to a certain extent on a par with what happened in Tehran in 1979, maybe a better comparison, let's say, with what is happening there now than the Saigon analogy. Mike Hempen reports that the United States says it has helped an American family and family members escape Afghanistan through an overland route into a neighboring country.
The U.S. official who confirmed the story says the citizen and the citizen's children were met by American embassy staff at the border. The official didn't provide details, citing security reasons and the need to preserve the viability of the route for possible future efforts. The evacuation is the first overland extraction the U.S. government has confirmed since it ended its air evacuation effort last week with the final withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. Mike Hemp in Washington.
And we'd like your thoughts, your feelings about this subject at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. As, again, this is turning into something resembling, apparently, the hostage situation in Tehran, Iran in 1979, maybe even more so than the hurried evacuation of people from Saigon 4 years earlier at the time of the fall of the country of South Vietnam. It is certainly not something that should be happening. An interesting set of theories that have been put forward here. On the one hand, the view by some that the State Department is holding things up, and whether or not that is part and parcel of the other charge that the Taliban is holding things up, essentially holding Americans hostage for full recognition. I guess the two are not mutually exclusive stories. For my thinking, since we owe the Taliban nothing, they're a pack of liars and savages, then tell them we'll recognize them, whatever. Get the Americans out, then don't recognize them. It's not as though we would owe them anything. Again, as I say, we're talking about a pack of savages. The only good Taliban is a dead Taliban, and well, it might not be practical for us to, in fact, carry that out. the fact remains that that is precisely what they deserve. They're not to be trusted. They're not to be dealt with. And I guess in a way you could say that they are to be trusted. They're to be trusted to the extent that they can be counted on to lie, to cheat, to hold people hostage, to do most anything that is in defiance of any act of civilized behavior. This is who they are. And 1-866-50-JIMBO as we talk to Gil in Manila, the Philippines. Hello, Gil.
Hello, Jimbo. Yeah, they're holding out for cash. They don't care about recognition. They want money. That's what it's going to come down to. And it's the face of evil which we are dealing with. And I'd like to add a little something in regard to your last guest, if I may.
Absolutely, please.
Oh, okay. Well, you know that from time to time I make a stab at humor, and over the years I've evoked a few chuckles from you. But I, in the past, have written a shtick. I actually wrote some shtick for Barack Obama when he came here in 2015, and I wrote shtick for President Duterte when he met with Donald Trump here in 2017. Mm-hmm. And one of the things for President Duterte, speaking in the first person, he said, "I understand there was some confusion in the Oval Office a few weeks ago. Upon his arrival, President Trump informed his staff that there would be a schedule change. He said, 'I'll be meeting with my publisher after lunch. Yes, I'll be meeting with the Little Brown People this afternoon.' To which his appointment secretary replied, 'Really? The Little Brown People? What time does the Filipino delegation arrive?'" So,
very funny.
Okay. But I know that President Duterte's humor was used because Donald Trump actually stole one of my jokes, and he used it about this time last year. Sometime I'll fill you in on that one.
Well, outstanding. Yes, we'll put that aside as one to pick the brain of Gil in Manila, a comedy writer, in addition to his other various experiences. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Here is Frank in Marion, Iowa. Good evening.
Hi, Jimbo. I'm sure you're fine. As this thing goes on, it's almost like a bad movie script. It's almost like the whole thing is unbelievable. We're chartering flights to Afghanistan to bring out American citizens that are being basically held hostage. It just gets me on how, Donald Trump has been nothing but criticized and whatever for the last 4 years. And Donald Trump is, it just goes to show you how divided the country is, because it also shows them how simple-minded a lot of people are. Joe Biden's always been a dumb man. He's always been stupid. It doesn't say much for the state of Delaware.
Well, he's never been noted for being a brilliant man. He certainly has in the past been caught plagiarizing. I know there are those today who would accuse him of lying, which I guess would be a step up in that these seem to be original lies.
Yeah, I just don't get that, Donald Trump, suppose you hated his guts. Look at what his policies were doing. He's a businessman. Even his global, commander-in-chief policies. I thought he did a pretty good job there for being so stupid. Joe Biden, with all these years of experience, this is the best he could do. This is the best America could do. And I heard a guy say today, this isn't America. And I agree with that. This is not America. This is Joe Biden and his administration. And I'm not going to curse, but it's a shame. It really is. It's a crying shame of what this country looks like right now because of that idiot.
Well, it certainly is unfortunate. I wouldn't go so far as to say that Joe Biden was known as being, quote, stupid, but he was known, I think, as being unoriginal. He was a get-along, go-along kind of guy, and pretty much ideologically drifted in the direction of the Democratic Party. When it drifted to the center, Lunch Bucket Joe, good old Joe, would drift to the center. When it drifted to the left, he drifted to the left. Now there are indications that, in fact, it may be drifting to the left. I'm not so sure that the entire Democratic Party is. I think that your garden variety Democrat has not fallen off the left edge of the world, as we are sometimes led to believe. I don't know that anybody ever accused Donald Trump of being stupid, but I think that his policies were sometimes a bit better than his execution of those policies. On the whole, he was better than Hillary Clinton would have been, and would have been better than Joe Biden is. Of course, that's not setting the bar terribly high. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Perhaps the situation in Afghanistan points out the sad reality that sometimes we are required to deal with the scum of the earth. We live on the same earth, and sometimes our paths intersect, and sometimes we find ourselves in a circumstance in which, in this case, American citizens and friends of ours have been placed in jeopardy, and they've not been let go. In other words, sometimes people who are inclined to take hostages can be in the driver's seat. Again, I would have no problem whatsoever with promising them whatever they want. If it's in fact money, as Gil is saying, I think that would be tricky, because to hand them money or bank credits, or however this is done, it certainly wouldn't be cash. I'm sure they'd be talking about money of a greater quantity than would fit into a large cargo plane. But that I would not be in favor of. If it's recognition, then I would say do exactly what they do to others and lie to them. Say, sure, we'll recognize you. Let these Americans go. Promise. Cross our heart and hope to die. Promise. And then not do it. We owe these people nothing. Again, whatever it takes. But it's, again, a circumstance that did not have to be this way. And in the future, we would certainly hope that we deal with the presence of Americans and, shall we say, friends of America in a troubled foreign country in a different way. Now, we have been told by the State Department that, for example, registering with the State Department, if you were a non-governmental American, say working for a charity or a religion or whatever, that it was suggested strongly that you register with the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. That's what I heard one State Department person say. I've heard others say that it was mandatory, but it obviously was not taken as mandatory by a lot of people. It is imperative, obviously, in the future that if you are admitted to such a country, that rather than put the United States in this circumstance, that you must register with the embassy and give your name, your location in that country, email, what have you, information necessary so that we could get them out in a relatively quick period of time. Doc in Wilmington, Delaware joins us now. Hello, Doc.
Jim, thanks for a great show once again, and thanks so much for taking my call, sir.
Thank you.
Jim, I think what this shows is, I've said it before on the show, I don't want to get negative about the president. He's still my president. I didn't vote for him. He's my commander-in-chief. But, Jim, I think it shows you that this man, Joe Biden, is just not up to the job. I think he's been a myth his career. I've known the man since the 1970s. This nonsense that he's some foreign policy expert is absurd. And the Europeans know him very well because of his travels as a senator over there and as vice president. And they said the thing I find amazing is that in the major news media, except for Fox News and some of their right-of-center outlets that are out there, there's a major news blackout on this thing in the major news media about what's going on in Afghanistan. They're trying to soft pedal it, blame it on President Trump and so on and so forth. I'd like your thoughts on that, Jim. It really disturbs me that the media isn't covering this as they should. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I would agree with you. Again, what's starkly clear, if you shop around for your news viewing, which I urge everyone to do, by the way, just to know what the other side is saying, you will find not just a disagreement on terms of the coverage of a given story, but you will find severe disagreement on what is being covered. It used to be that you could pretty much count on every major news outlet to be covering roughly the same stories. It was almost as if they were working off the same page. Sometimes that may have ignored some important stories, but these days you can ideologically pretty much guarantee that certain stories will just not be covered by certain outlets. And anything negative about the Biden administration is very often ignored. The crime stories, other such stories, and it's unfortunate. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Glad to have you with us on the program tonight as we look at what is increasingly resembling not only, of course, the tragic fall of Saigon in 1975, but now it's looking more and more like Tehran, Iran 4 years later and the hostage situation there as, again, precisely who is blocking the flight, some charter flights out of Afghanistan. It remains in question. But whether it is the Taliban officially or the State Department under duress from the Taliban, that doesn't alter the fact that apparently these people are sitting there, and it does take on the definite appearance of a hostage situation. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And as I noted before the break, obviously in the future, which is about all we can do at this time, is learn lessons for the future. In the future, it is obviously apparent that in any country that has even the prospect of some kind of, shall we say, a hostile takeover or problems of the sort that have occurred in Afghanistan, it is imperative that we have steps in place to see to it that this sort of thing doesn't happen, that there is a clear path out of the country for Americans. Again, as I've noted, when things were going south, a lot of these people should have been on their way out in the first place. But stupidity should not be a capital crime, and even people from this country too stupid to get the hell out should not be left behind by this or any other administration. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Here is Billy in Fort Worth, Texas. Good evening.
How you doing, Mr. Jim Bohannon? You know, you were talking about how the news has changed, but I can recall back, when NBC, ABC, and CBS, they did report on the news. But when Fox came along, I think that's when the news changed. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I don't think you are, because if you will notice exactly what happens on Fox, you will notice two distinct parts of their programming. And that is, one, their talk programming definitely leans heavily in the direction of conservative thought. Their news coverage has always been, as they claim it is, fair and balanced. Their news coverage has tended very much to be straightforward. So to give you the short answer, Billy, no, I would disagree with that assessment. I think that the change has come about by people from the aforementioned ABC, NBC, CBS's, and CNN's of the world to essentially adopt what could only be called advocacy journalism. That is to say, non-journalism of pursuing a point of view to the exclusion of what can be called honest news coverage. It's one thing to have opinion. Okay, that's why newspapers, for those who remember newspapers, have always separated the front page from the opinion page, the op-ed page. And there's nothing wrong with the concept of opinion. But opinion and what purports to be journalism, that is to say reporting, should not be intermingled. To do so is to undercut the integrity of the news process. And that has now happened. I don't know if this is being taught in J schools or not around the country, but I know that I have not been invited to be a guest speaker at any journalism schools in quite a few years. But it's not journalism. But there does seem to be the point of view out there that if you are pursuing what amounts to a woke agenda, it doesn't really matter if you are reporting things in a straightforward manner. That is terribly unfortunate. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626. By the way, although the U.S. is no longer on the ground in Afghanistan, the work of the President George W. Bush Institute continues there. And Afghan women are growing concerned about their future under Taliban control. We have more on that from correspondent Clayton Neville.
The President George W. Bush Institute has worked with Afghan women for years. The recent U.S. evacuations from Afghanistan focused on American citizens and Afghans who directly worked for the U.S. government.
And by and large, many of the women at risk have not made it out, and they're still there, and they're living in great fear.
Bush Institute Director Holly Kuzmich told me many of those women held leadership positions in their communities.
They're women who started schools in their community. They're women who worked for many of the international or Western-based organizations. They had contracts through USAID. They worked for UN or World Bank affiliated organizations. And so the Taliban knows that they're supportive of democracy efforts in that country, and that and those are the women who are at highest risk that we've all been working for.
According to Kuzmich, the concerns are very real.
We've already heard things like, music has been banned in Afghanistan now that the Taliban is back in control. Women are essentially saying, I can't go back to work right now. We've heard stories of women saying they found out that somebody who was a male coworker, they've now realized was a Taliban plant all of these years, so they can't go back to work. What's been showing up on television has been changed in recent days.
While the U.S. is no longer on the ground in Afghanistan, the Bush Institute is working with resources overseas to get Afghans who want to leave the country out, but also working to make sure those who don't are taken care of.
We can support them. Whether that's through, financial means and donations. We also need to be concerned about humanitarian issues in Afghanistan. There's real worry that there will be a food shortage in the coming weeks.
This as the Biden administration says it's focused on getting the remaining American citizens who want to leave Afghanistan out of the country. I'm Clayton Neville.
They might start, I suppose, by not standing in the way of those charter flights, if in fact it is the State Department which is doing so. Carol in Bedford, Indiana calls in. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Jim. This is can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're on the radio. Go right ahead, Carol.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to be sure you could hear me. It was either August 31st or September 1st. Glenn Beck was on another talk show, and was working with the organization NazareneSomething.com, and they'd raised several $1 million to get people on planes, and they had it arranged. And he said the State Department was thwarting them at every time he turned around. They were thwarting all his plans. He said a manifesto, the thing, the plane that has the people on it, that would wind up in the Taliban hands. And he also said that the State Department openly mocked them. And he also said, he was talking about the evil, and he wasn't talking about the Taliban. He was talking about the State Department was not working with them.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Again, for the life of me, I fail to see what could possibly be to the advantage of the State Department. I'll grant you that the State Department is going to try to do things to make itself look good. Not getting Americans out makes them look bad. Often you can look for motives, and you can discern what is actually happening in Washington. This one is inexplicable to me. Aside from what it's doing to the Americans in question, it makes the administration and this State Department look bad, and that's not, as a general rule, the goal of bureaucrats. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Back with more in just a moment. Back to the Jimbo Hannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Here is Tom in Sharon, Pennsylvania. Good evening.
Good evening, Jim. And, I guess it's getting kind of late, but happy Labor Day to you.
Well, thank you.
It seems to me, I have a vague memory right after the Cuban Bay of Pigs invasion, that on the Jack Parr show at the time, there was an effort, somebody was on his program raising money for tractors in exchange for Cuban exiles that were captured. In other words, that had already come to America, but were trying to go back into Cuba and were captured. And so, I mean, this isn't new.
Yes,
I guess
that was the Bay of Pigs. You may have,
yeah.
But
what I'm saying is, I guess inflation has set in, and we have higher stakes. I do want to point out, though, Jim, I noticed Mitch McConnell is saying there won't be any impeachment of Biden. I think he sees the situation the same as I do, that, as you pointed out, the Republicans stand a chance of gaining seats in the midterm, which means that if they do impeach Biden, or if Biden is taken out by the 25th Amendment, that it's going to be harder for the Democrats to get their choice.
Well, let's not forget one thing. There's no prospect, although certainly it looks very much like the Republicans will take control of a majority of the House in 2022. So they could, therefore, on a party line vote, impeach. There is no prospect that the Republicans are going to pick up 67 seats in the Senate to convict in a Senate trial, which would be what it would take to get rid of President Biden. The 25th Amendment, I think, is a distinct possibility, but that, of course, has to be initiated by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet. So, but for the Republicans to remove Joe Biden, I mean, they have the potential to be able to impeach him and hold a trial and all the rest of that, which they can't do now, by the way. You couldn't get it through the House. But they could pull a little legislative theater, but there's no way the Republicans pick up 17 seats in the Senate. That ain't going to happen.
The point is that, number one, if the public continues to sour on Biden, it's going to affect the Democrat Party overall for the next 3 years. Now, if he's still in there, and keep in mind, Nancy Pelosi said even before the inauguration, she called a meeting about the 25th Amendment, and she said this isn't about the current president. And Biden was interviewed even before the election and said, well, if I'm in a problem, then I'll do the same thing that I said to Barack Obama. I'll find a way out and I'll step down.
Well, that's interesting. But I keep in mind, of course, that Nancy Pelosi has nothing whatsoever to do with any 25th Amendment process. That would only happen if they got into a peeing contest between President Biden, who was saying, I'm fit to govern, and Kamala Harris and a majority of the cabinet that said, no, he's not. At that point, the Congress would get involved, but only after that occurred, if, in fact, that occurred.
That, Jim. But here's the part that maybe, I see a situation if Harris goes through and Biden is going to have a second term. So Harris maybe is too weak to be. I mean, they didn't even want her. She stepped out early because she couldn't get any money.
I'll put it this way. She winds up being president. She will be seriously challenged by the likes of Amy Klobuchar and Pocahontas Warren and Pete Buttigieg, all the people who ran in 2020. None of them are intimidated by Kamala Harris. I don't think that even if she were to become an interim president, that she would be the nominee in 2024. She doesn't have the political chops to do it.
Here's where the Democrats could pick up their strong point, and that is right now, before the midterm election, if they were to say, well, go to Jill Biden and say, look, you're going to have to go with us and get him to resign, step down, because otherwise he will be impeached. And
but he won't be convicted.
Be removed.
But he wouldn't be convicted.
That will give them a chance to hand choose who they want as the vice president, and put that person in place.
But you would have to you would have to then get rid of the President Kamala Harris in order to do that.
As vice president, in other words, being second in line, but a strong showing, weak president, strong vice president, popular vice president.
How would you get rid of President Kamala Harris?
You don't get rid of her. You let her carry out the rest of Biden's term, and then let things follow their natural course, which would mean she would not be
She would not be the nominee, but I'm not sure any Democratic nominee would be a favorite in 2024 at this stage of the game. So,
I'm just saying, I really think that's what.
Well, I'll put it this way:
Mitch
I think
McConnell's
that the Democrats will send a message to Jill Biden along those lines, but I don't think it'll be until after the midterms. But we'll see. You could be right. More to come. 1-866-50-JIMBO, and we'll be back with more calls in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Here is Don in Santa Barbara, California. Hello, Don.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Thank you for your great program all these years. By the way, how many years have you been on the radio?
On the radio? Oh, I've been this program just passed its 28th anniversary in January. I've been on the radio for 61 years.
You were just a kid.
Well, I was a kid. 61 years I've been on the radio, so a long time.
5 years old, and you had your own program.
5 years old. That's right. A child prodigy.
I'm wondering, the American citizens who are in Afghanistan at the moment, who some of them, I understand, want to remain there, and I'm just wondering, why would they want to remain? And I wonder if anyone knows approximately how many American citizens who are living there, I guess they're in business there, whatever. I'm just wondering how many, and why would they want to stay there?
Well, that, of course, I suppose you have to start with why would they want to be there in the first place? I mean, obviously, You're not motivated by the standard motivations of people. If you want to live in a godforsaken hellhole of a place like Afghanistan, automatically you're not motivated by the same things that motivate the rest of us. I suppose that we could always have questions as to whether or not they are, in fact, stating their views of their own free will or if they're being coerced. But again, I mean, there are all kinds of people out there, Don. What can I tell you? And again, if you would like to be in a place like that in the first place, maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't have any females in your company, or maybe you don't care if your wife or your daughter are treated like dirt. I mean, I don't know what motivates people. Certainly, it's an alien concept to me. But then again, I wouldn't be there in the first place. Somebody said to me, "Hey, you got a great chance. You can be a radio broadcaster in Kabul, Afghanistan." I would say, "Well, thanks for the offer, but I think I'll stay right where I am." So that probably would tell you a lot. Whatever it was that motivated them to be there. I mean, some people, I don't know the extent to which there are missionaries there. That would be a god-awful task to be a Christian missionary in a country run by the Taliban. You'd be lucky to get out alive. Some of them may be educators. Some may be teachers. Maybe some are trying to teach basic medical skills. I mean, I don't know what all are the various roles of people in non-government circumstances. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626 on the Bohannon Show. And again, we are of the hope that ultimately we reach some kind of a satisfactory outcome here. And satisfactory, of course, covers a lot of territory. By the way, to our producer, who I guess needs to know this now, the answer is yes, okay, to your question. But back to the discussion at hand, satisfactory to me is getting the Americans and our friends out. The Americans because they're Americans and we deserve to protect them, even, as I said, the stupid ones. We deserve to protect them. Our friends, we very much deserve to get out because we need friends in various places in the world. We will need friends in the future, and we are not sending a very good message to people out there who might at some point in time be a potential friend of ours. If you're in a country which might be some future battleground involving the United States, and you might, let's say, be conversant in English, and you might be predisposed to, let us say, be a translator, would you do so now? Would you? I can't imagine why. would you place trust and faith in the United States of America to have your back if the chips were down? I can't imagine why. I don't know why we have friends at all, quite frankly. I'm glad that we do, but I don't understand why we do. I really don't. And that's one of the sad stories of the day. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number. 1-866-505-4626 on the Jimbo Hannon Show. And more to come. Stay with us. We'll continue right here. Of course, we do weeknights. We are live 10 p.m. till 1 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. till midnight Central. Some places do carry us on a delay, but hey, we're glad that we have your coverage. This is Westwood One.
This is the sound of someone getting the most out of a summer day. So is this. Because for some, summer days were made for adventure. At the Lexus Golden Opportunity Sales Event, you'll find great deals on our entire line of leading-edge hybrids, each with the power and range to help you get the most out of your summer. But hurry, the sale ends September 7th. See Northtown Lexus.
Hi there and good evening. Welcome to the Jimbo Hannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talk. So we are delighted to welcome back to the Bohannon program, albeit a little delayed because of a slight communications foul-up, the award-winning actor, screenwriter, director, producer, and singer, Robert Davi. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Yeah, there was a digit mistake that I didn't catch. And then when I realized, I called the station. I said, well, what happened? And I realized in the end of the email that John sent, the number was wrong, and I didn't catch that digit being off.
But that's okay. The good news is that, of course, as a fundraiser, we will be auctioning off Robert Davi's home number later in the program. So, yeah, right. All right. You've got a brand new project underway here. You are going to be directing a Hunter Biden biopic called My Son Hunter. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's the brainchild of Anne and Philip McAleer, and it's a terrific script by Brian Godswa, and it's a how should I put it? You know, it's not a true story except for all the facts. You know, and so it's going to have. I don't know if you saw the film American Hustle by David O. Russell.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
You should see it. It's a terrific film. But I'm going to do it in the style of that, and because it has it's about crime in some aspects and corruption, but it's dealt with a very humanistic touch to it and a humor to it. And I'm sensitive to the Hunter Biden story in that he's a self-proclaimed drug addict or recovering addict. And I think most families in this day and age have been touched by drug addiction in some way. So I don't want to demonize that aspect of it. I've been touched. My ex-wife and a child of mine had a problem. And it's a difficult issue. So I want to deal with that without demonizing it. And yet, how does someone that has that addiction and have one of the most powerful fathers in the world kind of basically use him as the bagman in some instances?
Well, yeah.
And all told through the eyes of a 22-year-old Eurasian girl who is a left-wing progressive, revolutionary, who then comes to terms with meeting Hunter, and it's very interesting script.
Yeah, kind of. It's not exactly what you call a dull, dry documentary approach to this, is it?
No. This is going to be look. There are a lot of conservatives try to make films sometimes. Sometimes they make them well, and sometimes they there's a demonizing aspect to it, and
it doesn't hit the audience like it should, because I feel that if we're going to change hearts and minds, or at least give people a chance to kind of like sit back and listen to something that they may not have been able to because of the media and other issues, sit back and watch a story and, be entertained and be educated. And so I want to tell this where we're not preaching just to the choir, but to people that normally may not tune into a film because of frustrating it being demonization.
And something to keep in mind, too, I have sympathy for Joe Biden, the human being. I really do, and his loss of his wife and child in a car wreck. And then, of course, the person we could call, I guess, the good son, because that's an apt description, Bo, dies of brain cancer. And this is the surviving son. And I understand that a father's love can go pretty far. But again, this father happens to be one of the most powerful people in the world. And at some point, it does seem to me that tough love should have entered into this, along the lines of something, Hunter, you're my son, I love you to pieces, but you cannot use my name in this type of fundraising. You just can't do this. It's going to drag me down. At some point, that should have been said, and there's no evidence that it ever was said.
No, there is no evidence of it. Even in Hunter, I've been reading Hunter Biden's, autobiography, his confessional novel, so to speak, which is short on confession, but strong on justification.
Yes,
which sometimes people have a blind spot to being able to see certain things, or maybe just can't say them for whatever reason, protecting of the family. But it is a riveting story. And again, I do have sympathy for, I don't want to, make fun of Joe Biden's idleness. That's another thing.
Yeah.
And the tragic, you're going to feel for both him and for Hunter. And you'll at the same time say, oh my God, how did this happen? When you're dealing with Ukraine and the Chinese and Russian mafia connections and, hitting the crack pipe every half hour while he's negotiating with some of these Burisma people.
Yeah. Again, it's a sad situation, and I'm glad to see that this project is going to not come on quite as much like a sledgehammer as some might think that it would be. You, of course, are known to most of us as an actor. These other titles of screenwriter, producer, and in this case, director, are aspects of your career of which I was unfamiliar.
I directed a film called The Dukes, 2007, that won 9 awards. It was in the Rome Film Festival. It was in the comedy Festival of Comedy Alpe d'Huez, the biggest comedy festival in France, and in Monte Carlo, and in some in America. And it was myself and Chaz Palminteri, Peter Bogdanovich, Miriam Margolyes, and terrific little film. Came out and just when that crash happened, the week of the crash. Mm-hmm. But it got tremendous response and reviews, and I've been looking for a project, Jim, that I've been offered quite a few different things. I then acted in a film that they asked me to fix called Magic, that you can find on Delta Rescue, the largest animal sanctuary. Their website, there's a film called Magic that's quite lovely. Christopher Lloyd plays the voice of a dog who's an angel. But I've been looking for something that's quite interesting, and also I feel that we don't tell stories enough. There's tremendous stories that should be told, and because culture, everything, you see what culture's done to our society and to America. It's quite astounding how the left has embraced culture, as Marxist culturalism does, but the right doesn't know how to. They don't know how to communicate, really. They really don't know how to communicate, and at least some don't.
Yeah. Not well enough, not in an era in which communication is vitally important. Certainly, Clint Eastwood has made a career out of directing himself. To a certain extent, I guess Mel Brooks has done the same. I would think that would be very hard. Have you ever directed yourself?
Yes, in The Dukes. I'm in it as well.
All right.
Oh,
yeah. How that's got to be tough. I mean, how do you do both well? Well,
first off, it's preparation. It's knowing the material. It's also, I always looked at film, even as a young, before I stepped in front of, people think, maybe I was a tough guy, but I was weaned on Chekhov and Strindberg and Shakespeare, and I did over thousands of performances on stage. And, you learn the craft, studied with Adler and Strasberg, and then 45 years in the business, working with the best directors and best actors, and, not just being a stone on the set, but assimilating or, osmosisly getting the knowledge you can from, and I looked at film as a director. I didn't just look at the film. I like the term auteur, and I always liked the idea of someone that orchestrates and conducts and has a vision for a film. So that's kind of inbred in me.
Stay with us, more to come as we talk to Robert Davi, a very eclectic individual, obviously a Renaissance man of entertainment. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626, as he moves forth to direct this Hunter Biden biopic. 1-866-50-JIMBO, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. You might wonder why we've chosen to insert some Frank Sinatra into the program at this point, and the answer is that we have not. We have inserted some Robert Davi. That's really remarkable, and if anyone goes online, you can find any number of videos of you. You do an amazing Sinatra, Robert.
Thank you. I'm not impersonating him. It's my tribute to him. I did my first film with him, Jim, and thank you for having me on when my first album dropped. That went to number 6 on Billboard Jazz. You gave a nice bump to the album that was on Amazon and iTunes. And I'm finishing up a new album, and I'm going to let you know when it's finished because I'd like to come back on.
Oh, I'd love to have you. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself an actor who sings or a singer who acts?
Singing, I think Gustav Mahler said something like music is the closest to the absolute. And I started doing both concurrently. Mm-hmm. And I studied opera in Florence when I was a young kid and at Juilliard in New York. And I think it's both. Mm-hmm. But singing is really, there's nothing like, I tour the world, doing shows. And, for 3,000, 5,000, 15,000 people, different areas. And there's nothing like having a full big band behind you and riding that wave and communicating to an audience and getting that feedback and that enthusiasm. There's something so exciting about that.
Yeah, I so admire that ability. Have never sung, never even was in the high school choir, anything of that nature. Instrumentalist, I used to have my musician's union card for the trombone. But that goes back to a much earlier era, and I've always admired people who can do this. Was this an early on gift? Did you sing in school or church or something of that nature?
Yes, I did. I mean, I discovered the voice. Actually, it was in church in 8th grade, and the nuns started looking at me strangely as we were singing. I was singing it, the hymns in church with my mom, and then in 9th grade, believe it or not, I went to Seton Hall High School in Patchogue. And I was on the varsity football team. And after practice, in the shower, because it would be an echoey thing and it was steamy and nice, I would sing sometimes. And one time a nun heard me singing in the hallway, sent one of the guys in, said, "Who's that singing?" And they came out and told her, and she said, "I want to talk to him." So I put a towel on. I went to the door with a little crack in the doorway, and I said, "Yes, sister." And she says, "That's you singing?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You have a beautiful voice. I want you to join the Glee Club." Now, growing up back then, the term Glee Club, we weren't as woke as we are today. So I said, "Thank you very much, sister, but I'm very busy now with the drama club." And anyway, she called my mother, and my mother goes, "Why not try it?" And I did, and I started winning awards, and then they got me a teacher to study with opera, and I became first place in New York State School Music Association solo competition. And then just loved the opera. And then my film career took off, and the acting career took off. And I put that on hold until I did the Dukes, and then I sang one song in that film that I directed, the Dukes. And everyone, that Bob Cavallo, who's the head of Disney Music, said to me, he said, "You should go back to singing." And
okay.
yeah, and I did a demo, and I brought it to him, and he said, "You want the truth?" I go, "Yeah." So he called this guy down, and the marketing guy, and they said, "Let's do it." They loved it, and I did the first album that Phil Ramone, the great producer, produced it, and the rest is now I've been singing quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's some great, as I say, there is great stuff out there that is online that you can hear and you can see. Obviously, this is a labor of love for you. Do you play places like Vegas or Atlantic City?
Oh yeah, no, I haven't been to Atlantic City yet, but I played I headlined the Venetian, I headlined the Orleans, I did the last standing shows because Don Rickles loved my singing, and he knew that I was close to Sinatra, and he wanted to do a show with me, and we were scheduled to do a bunch of shows at the Orleans together, and he had gotten sick, and then a year later, he felt well enough, and we booked it again, and we did 4 shows there, and then the last one being a Sunday night, and he went into the hospital on a Monday morning, and then from then on, he did the shows, sitting down. Yeah, I've been in Vegas, and like I said, around the world. I did a private concert at the Eiffel Tower.
Well, really?
They shut down the Eiffel Tower, believe it or not. Yeah.
That's too wild.
I've been in Estonia, Sweden, Finland, Italy, Lake Como, Australia, all over.
That's fantastic. Now back to your current project here, this biopic of Hunter Biden. That must make you really popular in Hollywood, but I guess it doesn't matter since this is not a Hollywood film.
Well, 2 things. I've been very honest. You call yourself like a militant conservative, I think, in a certain way, middle of the road. I think there's your politics are,
right.
You're kind of fair-minded.
I hope so.
So I'm like that. Yes, and I'm like that too, but I'm very outspoken. I've been outspoken. But, I've got to tell you that some of my friends, and they're substantial names, you would know the names, had heard my interview on this Hunter Biden take, and they said that I made them want to see the film. Because I'm not going to, I don't want to do it. Look, I'm going to tell the truth. It's going to be satirical in aspects to it, but I'm not going to hold back the corruption aspect to it. But you're going to feel empathy for Joe and for the son, and again, this young girl that has to go through this transition from being a bit of an anarchist to saying, what the heck did I misread this thing.
1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. I know we had a caller who dropped Wingman in Moses Lake. Give us a call back. We'll be sure to get you on the air to have a chance to speak with Robert Davi. I've been a fan of his over the years in a variety of ways, and I must confess that when I first heard about this singer, Robert Davi, I wondered, are there 2 of them? And then I saw a video, and I thought, well, nope, that's definitely him. That's remarkable. Are there other actors that we know of as actors who in fact sing? Because I think you're probably best known as an actor, but I've often wondered, Are there others?
Yeah, there are others. Now, how proficient they might be or not, he right now isn't the flavor of the month, but he's a terrific person. Kevin Spacey did the Bobby Darin story, and
that's right.
Kevin, he directed that, and he was terrific in that, and his singing was terrific in that. And there are Molly Ringwald did an album, and there are some, Jeff Goldblum is a terrific jazz pianist.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yes, he's a terrific jazz pianist. So there's quite a few actors that straddle that world.
All right. We're going to come back and talk some more with Robert Davi, in particular his dealings with Hollywood, a man who certainly is. We'll be back in a moment. Is that great stuff or not? Robert Davi, and He sounds remarkably like Frank Sinatra. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'd love to check in with Robert periodically on his varied Renaissance entertainer kind of career. Wingman in Moses Lake, Washington, has in fact called back in. Good evening, sir.
Hello, Jimbo, and to your guest. Very enjoyable. Thank you for your service, Jimbo, and what a great talent that gentleman has, taken us back to the golden years of some of the best sounds that I can recall, and the personalities that were involved. But what I really calling about, he had a comment earlier about do whatever we can to get our people out of Afghanistan, promise the Taliban, and then
well, that's what I said. Yeah, that was a comment made by me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree.
All right.
I was listening to a show earlier today, and the question from the commentator to the guest was, why was there such a rush? Why was Biden in such a rush?
Right. Well, we're actually going to concentrate more, I think, on our guest in this portion of the program. I wish you'd called in back when I made that comment in the preceding hour, Wingman. But thank you for your thoughts, and I agree that Robert Davi is a man who does take us back to an era. I just love the songs of the era, and honestly, I've always preferred song lyrics that were intelligible and understandable. Maybe that makes me a real throwback, Robert. I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think it's what's needed in our society today. You know, like I said, Jim, I travel the world doing that music. I call it it's called the Great American Songbook, but I call it the Shakespeare of America. It was the golden age of American music, and you've had from Louis Armstrong to Duke Ellington to Ella Fitzgerald, Sinatra, Dean Martin, you know, all the greats. And it made the world fall in love with our country. It made people in different countries speak English. I go to Estonia, where my wife is from, and people love the music there, in Estonia, in Finland. No matter what, I was in Macau. I don't care where you go, what language they speak in France. They understand and love the lyrics of the Great American Songbook. It plays in their malls till today. And there was a gentility about that music, a poetry about that music. It's when men were men and women were women, and we treated each other with respect, you know. And I think it should be taught in the schools instead of critical race theory, because what you have today, not to get too political about this stuff, but if they taught jazz in schools, it comes from the Great American Songbook, comes from the struggle of the black jazz and jump blues artists and the English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, American Indian, Lebanese, people from all walks of life that were here since the Revolutionary War, and a large portion from the sons and daughters of Jewish immigrants. And that amalgam is what America is about. It's that unity and the best of each other working toward a music form. And, you know, it's unfortunate that today what we have is a splitting up of our e pluribus unum.
Yeah.
You know?
I certainly do. That is a really vital thing. We could use a lot more unum. 1-866-50-JIMBO as we talk to Mike in Brunswick, Maine with our guest, Robert Davi. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how you doing tonight, Jim?
Well, thank you.
Hey, Robert, I got a question for you about, you know, the corruption that kind of went on in the family here. You know, I grew up around a numbers racket, and usually a bagman was a bagman forever. And, you know, I watched this kid. Now, Bo seemed to be the chosen son, and Hunter seems to be the bagman kid. And it seems that the family, including Joe, his brother and his sister, seems to me when you read the emails that Hunter sent to his daughter, they destroyed this kid. They never let him out of the bagman game.